Welcome to our channel. Get ready for a collection of incredible stories that will send shivers down your spine. If you love mystery and horror, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more thrilling content. Now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into the stories. Pamohi Mine, Nice. It was the young secretary who was supposed to help him with the paperwork, but his face. It was mangled into mush, only his eyes and barely moving tongue were intact. He dropped dead. Nick meanwhile climbed out of his workstation, grabbing a chair. A couple seconds later, something dragged the guy's corpse into the darkness of the hallway, leaving a trail of blood. Nick lifted the chair over his head and headed toward the danger with cautious steps. The hallways were impenetrable darkness and graveyard silence. Nick was afraid to turn on the lights, that way he might be discovered. Wandering through the corridors, Nick found a door ajar, from which a small strip of light emanated. He cautiously approached the door and quickly yanked it open. A gruesome scene opened before him. All of his co-workers were torn and tormented. The office looked like a slaughterhouse, covered in a dark green slurry with a tinge of red. Insect-like limbs were scattered all around, some still twitching. And the co-workers themselves looked like ragged insect bodies. Something hit Nick's shoulder, something hot and sticky. Nick screamed loudly, trying to get the incomprehensible nasty thing off his shoulder, but only made things worse. In addition to his shoulder burning, he also burned his arm. The water cooler that Nick had accidentally hit with his back helped him. The mess melted the plastic, thus spilling water over the man's body. Nick couldn't resist either, the spilled water causing him to fall to the floor. As he regained consciousness, he noticed a silhouette in the darkness. Someone was approaching him, making an annoying hissing sound. This someone was one of those strange types that stood by the cooler, the middle one of the trio. His jaw now resembled a creepy creature from the depths of the sea, with two pairs of claws and a long trunk from which flowed the very mass that had landed on Nick's shoulder. The stranger's eyes stretched out on slimy tubes and moved in all directions, scrutinizing its victim. Nick crawled away from the fearsome guest. It didn't matter where, just away from him, but his path was blocked by another of the trio, a tall one. No sooner had Nick turned to look at him than something ignited near him. And so it did a couple times, until it hit his hands. The tall one had black orbs with a red dot, instead of the usual human eyes. From his medial commissure, he was emitting an incomprehensible transparent liquid, striking everything. Its mouth contorted in a crooked smile, its long tongue laden with drafty drool beating down its owner's cheeks. A low one came next. A tail with a spike appeared from behind him. With this outgrowth, the third tried to pierce the victim, but Nick was able to dodge its attacks. Having gained strength, he got up and rushed to the exit. The trio followed him. The office seemed like a labyrinth, long and endless corridors with many doors, small halls and endless staircases. It seemed as if there would never be a way out, but then the coveted transparent doors appeared. As if in a dream, the corridor stretched out, preventing Nick from escaping. As if some unknown force didn't want to keep him alive. The Trinity was getting closer and closer, their clinging paws closing in on Nick with every second, but luck was on the victim's side. Nick kicked the door open with his big shoulder and rushed toward the house, calling for help. Only there was no one outside. The lights in the windows were on, but it was as if no one had heard the cries for help. As he reached his shelter, Nick noticed that the trio had fallen behind. He went up to his floor and knocked on the door of the apartment, but it opened by itself. Nick did not enter at once, stood for a while, when he realized that there was no danger. Then he slipped into the apartment, remembering to lock the door. Amanda. Marcus. Leon. I'm home. There was no one in the apartment. All the stuff's there, everything's clean. Maybe they went to the store. Amanda's purse and wallet are still here. Nick's confused. 1 minute he's got a trio attacking him, now his wife and kids are missing. He waited a while longer, but the family never came back. There's only one thing to do, go back to Uncle Austin's. Whoa, son, what happened to you? It's a long story, Uncle Austin. Here, have a seat on the couch. I'll get you everything you need. Nick was devastated. Like a dead man, he staggered to the couch. Austin returned a minute later with medicine and bandages. During the treatment of the wounds, Nick told everything. The scientist only grunted in surprise, shaking his head. I guess since the first time you came to me and stated your purpose, they heard right away. They have ears and eyes everywhere. But why did you decide to help me? And that was just one chilling tale, but we're not done yet. Get ready, because the next story might be even more terrifying. Uncle Austin did not remain silent at once. After finishing with Nick's wounds, he lowered his head, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You rest for now. You'll find out tomorrow. And we'll try to find your family. Nick settled down in another room, where there was a normal bed. He couldn't sleep for a long time, so he looked around the room. Austin's son had once played, studied, and ate here, until he'd moved out for work, and when the scientist had gone on a bender, the son had stopped keeping in touch with his father, ashamed of his situation. The room has been empty since then, all the things left in their places. It's as if time has stood still here. The photographs, captured on tape by his memories, were proof of that. There Austin looked like a brilliant scientist. It made Nick's heart feel even heavier. This day is terrible, he said quietly and sank into the world of dreams. The next day Nick and Austin left the house early in the morning. It is always crowded at this time, you can blend in with the crowd, so it will be easier to get to their destination, the cathedral of the founding father of Anasecta. The one God for all citizens of the state, the one who saved the people of the prosperous country from foreign savages, fencing off their land, planting impenetrable forests with mighty trees whose tops reached to the sky. It is in this cathedral that Nick's decisive moment lies. Perhaps there he would find his family, and with them, escape from this horror. The journey was not a long one. For about an hour, they wandered around the nooks and crannies, turned into courtyards, hidden alleys. Soon, the domes of the cathedral appeared. Nick and Austin were just in time, the morning service had come to an end, and the crowd of old men, women with children, and invalids were heading for the exit. It was only when the last parishioner had left that the young priest approached the guests. His countenance looked feminine, aided by his long black hair and eyelashes, but something stood out about him, the taut, web-like skin between his fingers. You have brought us your friend, Mr. Austin, the priest said sweetly. Yes. I was just talking about him. Is your father not slumbering now? Austin asked quietly. He knew you would come early. Ha ha ha, he always knows everything, sly devil, grinned the scholar. The young priest led the guests to the patriarch himself, whose veins, like those of all the clergy, were filled with the blood of the founding father. And so it is in every church and cathedral, where a special lineage has for centuries given all of itself to the service of the chief god of the Anasecta. The main peculiarity of each such clan is fishy features, or maybe even reptilian. The patriarch's quarters were deep beneath the church, just outside the main gate where one can meet the founding father. Passing the spiral staircase, they went straight into the bedroom. It was semi-dark, red in tone, smelling of incense and flowers. There were many shelves of sacred writings, a desk with tall stacks of manuscripts piled high on it. Everything indicated that this room belonged to one who had devoted his life to the service of God and blessed studies. Come closer. There was a loud, hoarse voice, like a thunderclap. I'll go, the priest declined, and Nick and the scholar obediently approached the bed, which was quite large, almost a third of the room. There was the patriarch himself. With an incredible giant fish head, with a watery body that took up the whole bed but still had fatty sides hanging over the edges. Despite the mustiness, there was still a silver gleam burning in his eyes. He looked at Nick admiringly, waving his short arms around. So there he was, the one who had seen the world beyond the Anasecta border. You were lucky. Very lucky. The patriarch spoke in a low voice. Nick stared at him for a moment, then turned to Austin. What is he talking about? You are chosen, Nick. chosen by God himself to be a sign to the foreigners. Chosen? To be a sign? I don't understand. Nick sensed something wrong. You got nowhere to go. If we don't, they'll make you, but you know how they are. And we want to do this the easy way. Out of the darkest corners came two men wearing masks that mimicked the face of grasshoppers. They took Nick under their arms and led him to the wooden doors next to the patriarch's bed. Everything is already prepared. You have no other choice, the patriarch said, waving his hand. Nick was dragged into the great hall, to the table. By the table were his children, but they were tied to poles, facing the giant statue of the founding father, an uncanny likeness of every insect on the planet, with many arms and legs, a barrel-shaped body and a long sting, and a face that was a mouth made of 1,000 small teeth, with saw-like jaws. The holes that were the eyes glowed with an orange light. There was a rumble, the whole place shook. That's it, Nick. You could say that your curiosity has been satisfied. What's left is the most important part, Austin said cryptically, standing between the pillars. He looked at the children, then at Nick. You must eat your love and then drink the blood of your children so that they may leave our country with you. The founding father himself has chosen you and your family for this so-called crusade, so that those who live on the Anisecta side of the border will know their inferiority to us, that the day will soon come when the Anisecta will once again rule the world as it did millions of years ago. What? What are you talking about? Nick tried to struggle, but the two masked men were stronger than him. They put him in a chair, his legs and chest covered with plates so Nick couldn't escape. Let the children go. They don't have any other choice either, Nick. You should be happy. On the table was a tray. Austin lifted the lid. On various plates and saucers were his wife's body parts. Boiled, roasted, and stewed, with different spices, with broths of different flavors. It was a real treat. Eat it, Nick. It's part of the ritual, Austin said sternly. No. No. Never. Shouted Nick. Austin had to forcefully shove chunks of Nick's wife's food into his mouth. Nick himself was still struggling, but after a couple of hard blows, he obediently began to eat his wife. The meal was over. Nick, exhausted and without reason, shook his head, muttering something under his breath. The plates released him. The two masked men led the boy to the pillars, holding him by the arms. Austin took a knife out of his pocket and handed it to Nick. Drink their blood, Nick, and you will be free. Nick fell to his knees, holding the knife with both hands. With tears in his eyes, he looked at his children. They were sleeping soundly. They don't know they'll never wake up again. To tell you the truth, you have beautiful sons. It's a shame they weren't destined to live on. There was a chance that one of your children would have become an Anisect, Austin said with a sneer. Come on, don't bore us. Nick slit the throats of his children and drank the poor thing's blood with difficulty. Austin watched him with a smile. You're like a vampire, Nick. Drinking so greedily. Then there was another rumbling sound, and with renewed vigor everything shook. The stone slab beneath the statue of the founding father rose. A cold wind blew from it, and a light orange light beckoned to it. That's it, Nick. You're free. Maybe your dreams came true. Are you still wondering what's out there in the Deadlands? Nick looked blindly at Austin, at the kids, at the light. He headed for the exit, stumbling and turning around. Austin waved in his wake. Reaching the light, Nick immersed himself in it. So warm. So nice. Henry and Lucy strolled peacefully along the lake, talking heartily to each other. As children they had run along the shore, bathed in the warm waters, tried to outrun each other, and now, already engaged, with their children, they were resting peacefully and quietly. Only their peace was broken by the appearance of a strange creature, a disgusting-looking grasshopper, the size of a bear. All covered in flesh, with a human face and limbs, it was heading in their direction, crying loudly. Thus was the peaceful rest as well as the lives of all mankind disturbed. For in every corner of the earth they began to find strange cracks in the rocks, in the earth, in the mountains, and even in the seas and oceans. After all, very soon will come the first inhabitants of the earth, resembling insects, fish and reptiles, who lived together with dinosaurs, long before the first man. And the world will once again plunge into the prehistoric era. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.